Hey y'all, welcome back. So today we're talking about Defy Me, the fifth book in Me, and let's just get into it and see what happens after the weird ending of the last one. This one's told from Juliet, Warren, and Kendra's POVs, being that they're all in different places and deal with different things by simultaneously trying to get back to each other again. So it starts out with Warren and Ella when they're kids, when she storms into his room and sings his scars. He is mad knowing that Anderson is hurting him, but Aaron just tells her to leave it alone, and also tells her how he's actually very worried about his mother, who's sick, and worse is that he thinks his dad is the one doing it. So like you can see, this one's gonna have a lot of flashbacks to their childhood and their memories, I guess. Now back to the current time, and Azura has turned everyone invisible so that they can safely make it back to Sector 45. There once again Kenji is the only one with any ounce of loyalty in him, and he's the only one who wants to go after Juliet and Warner. But everyone else thinks that they're probably dead and there's no point in going after them, and he should instead think of where to escape while they still have time. Well, everyone but Adam, who's tired of running and hiding and instead wants to stay and live there with James. And just when Kenji had gotten some hope that Adam had stopped being a coward, he ruined it. But James too speaks up, saying he doesn't want to give up and how he thinks the whole circus show back there was perhaps just a distraction so that no one would notice Juliet and Warner being taken. And I don't know how they would have pulled that off, but okay. So if this is how everything that happened at the end of the last book is supposed to be explained, it's not a good one. And it honestly doesn't make any sense either, but Castiel asks Nazira to tell them what she had told him, and whatever it is she tells them shocks the hell out of Kenji, and I guess probably everyone else too. Past Juliet, when she meets Aaron while visiting after her parents' death, or more accurately, after they had mind-controlled her to think that, and thinking she was someone else, and she's there because she thinks that Anderson is her social worker who was gonna put her into a new family. But when she and Aaron see each other again and talk, it seems that they don't recognize each other. So over to Kenji and what all of them are up to. Nadira is telling them all who Juliet really is and shows them some photos. She also tells them how she had just woken up 6 weeks earlier and all of a sudden just remembered her. She started secretly digging and found out what had happened. They also see a picture amongst the ones Nazir handed out, with both Ella and Aaron in it, which shocks the hell out of everyone, especially Adam, who kind of always thought that at the end of the day he knew her first. Turns out he didn't. She also tells them how she and the other kids had first been told that Ella and Emmeline had drowned, but later on had their memories of them erased because of how emotional they were about having lost two of their best friends at such a young age. I know it's very shocking. People, especially kids, are emotional about losing two close friends and not just moving on in a day like nothing happened. She had later told Hay that too has some memories of them coming back, and he was also going to talk to others and see if anyone else remembered them as well. She also tells them that she's planning on staying and helping them, and even better, that she thinks she knows where they are. Again, we're moving back in time to when Aaron was 16. He goes to talk to his dad about wanting to stay with his mom, but Anderson is pretty annoyed with something that Juliet had done. And when Delalio asks him if he should bring her up, Anderson tells him to bring her, even though Aaron is there. And then back to the future, it seems like he's being held somewhere in a cell and heavily sedated. And now from there heading over to Kenji and what the group are up to. They're all trying to make a plan for hours, but deciding to take a break, he heads over to his room, but Nazira follows him wanting to talk. So then over to Juliet and her memories from the past. Hers pick up where Aaron's left off. She remembers when she had been arrested after killing the kid at the store, and she and Aaron seem to have a connection while not remembering each other at all. Which seems to annoy Anderson a lot, and it looks like that's why he wanted Juliet brought up while Aaron was there, to see if they will keep falling for each other and not happy that they are. But before she can remember more than that, she wakes up in her room with her parents there. She starts panicking, wanting to know what happened to everyone and if her friends are okay, which annoys her parents, and then her mom especially gets mad when she starts asking about Warner, and she slaps the hell out of her. scolding her that she needs to stop acting hysterically. And when that doesn't help much, and her mom doesn't feel like dealing with it much more, she leaves and her dad just drugs her again. And from there we're back at base with Kenji and the rest of the gang. And it turns out that Nuri is actually Cassie's daughter, who's been taken away, but during all these years she seems to have become a rebel leader herself, like her father. Oh, it's a slightly younger Warner who had gone to see Juliet when she had been arrested and locked up before being sent to the asylum. There they talk for a bit of time and he feels like he knows her from somewhere, but can't point his finger on it. Getting back to Kenji, Liu comes in to tell them that he will help getting them out and keep them safe as long as they're there. And when questioned why, he tells them that it's because he's Aaron's grandfather. He was some preservation and ends up telling them everything. How Ella was supposed to be raised in a normal family, but Anderson had gone back on his words as soon as he got the chance. How her and Aaron's story goes back to their childhood, and how he had time and time again had put them together in different circumstances, and then wiped their memories every time, when they would get drawn to each other every time. He tells Adam how Anderson had always kept tabs on him, and had basically manipulated the whole situation from the beginning, and how he would be sent in as her cellmate, basically because he's a sick bastard and had wanted to put the two brothers against each other. He also tells them how Ella and Emmeline had always been very crucial for the establishment, operation, synthesis, something like that. Something about the architect and the executioner. I don't exactly get it, but I think it's supposed to be that Ella kinda destroys the world, so Emmeline can rebuild it or something. And also, not to sound like a hater, but this doesn't add up with any part of the plot in the series so far. It doesn't even add up with the part that she was supposed to grow up in a normal family if she's a key player in their plans, and especially because of her powers. It would make sense for her to be raised by her parents, properly trained for what they have planned, and also to make sure that one of the two people all their plans depended on would be 100% loyal to them and their cause, instead of joining a rebellion. But back to the story. Leo gets shot and killed by none other than Anderson, back from the other side that he apparently never got to, even though he had been shot twice in the head, because well, why not? Now getting back to Juliet, she's been taken to a lab and is put into a kinda bed, kinda chair thing, where they give her memories of her and Emmeline, and later on her mom comes in and starts going on about how disappointing she is and how emotionally weak she is. So they start replacing her memories with made-up ones they want her to have, basically killing Juliet Ferrer. So a short check-in with Kenji's situation, it turns out that his fear came true and Nazira had been selling them out to Anderson. And before any of them can properly process anything that's happening, they're knocked out with needles. And from there we head back a year to another Baron's memories, but this time he still remembers her as Juliet, and apparently this time their memories hadn't been removed from their last encounter 2 years earlier, when Anderson catches them talking, and during this encounter she had touched him and obviously nothing had happened. But still, when he gets there to send her away, he tells Aaron that he'll kill her if he ever does something like that again. Now he wants Barney to reform and weaponize her, but also tell him that he doesn't see much use in telling him any details, being that he won't remember this the next day. Which doesn't make much sense to him, being that he doesn't know how his memories have been removed like 100 times throughout his life, but it doesn't make sense to us, knowing that he probably have his memories removed again the next day. And when he starts looking through the paperwork, he's dumbfounded that it's entirely written like all of this has been his idea. And he tells him that it's because he wouldn't have trusted it if he knew it came from his father. And on top of that, this way Juliet will hate him and we see him as her oppressor instead of her friend, which will hopefully finally break the lifelong cycle of them falling for each other. Which jokes on him, because even with that, they still did. But back to the present, he's still locked up and given barely any food or water, and what he does get is poisoned. But thanks to a messed up way all of them were raised, he knows all of this is some sick test, and there's something there he needs to figure out. Being locked up in the asylum where Juliet had been, and as if he's not suffering enough as it is, he gets choked from behind and passes out after getting back from his shower. Over to Ella, and yes, from here on, this is Ella's POV, because Juliet is basically no more. She has a memory from when she was 6 and had met Aaron and Anderson, and he had invited her to have dinner with them. This was before she had gone to live with her new family. She and Aaron start talking, or she realizes that she really can't remember her past, and that's pretty much when the memory ends. And so back to the present, she actually still remembers everything. Somehow this time the memory manipulation, or whatever it's called, had gone wrong, but she's playing along and lets her mom, who is posing as her doctor, because this version they had wanted to make of her, she had been in an accident and she's letting them think that she actually doesn't remember anything. Over to Kenji, who even knocked him out in the cell, who I guess everyone could see is coming, is Nazira, and now he's tied up on a plane on the way to Ella. But what's kinda shocking is that Anderson is there as well, but it seems he doesn't know Nazira brought Kenji along, which is probably why he's tied up and invisible. Now when they're flying to rescue, we're also pretty much acting like this.
Be smart. Sociopath. I am not a sociopath. You know, he says that a lot. Sociopaths.
Though whispering being that Anderson's like right there. And let's move over to two damsels in distress, starting with Aaron. He's remembering a time when they were kids before Ella and Emmeline were basically entirely erased. They were talking and she was telling him that she had overheard her mom talking about how someday people would be able to live underwater, which doesn't add much to the story except to show how they can always had plans to manipulate people's biology. But coming back from the memory, he's not exactly doing very well, because he hasn't eaten in 3 days so that he could be thinking clearly without his mind being clouded because of the poison. He also knows there's something odd about the way he's being held, and tries to figure it out by thinking about all the things he can remember about Max and Evie, but come out mostly blank, which is concerning to him, but before he can dwell on it too much, his father walks in. And from there, we move on to check on Ella, who remembers when they were kids and them making pancakes for her family breakfast, during which no one was helping Emmeline make them, which frustrated her a lot. But in the present time, after she had barely audibly said Emmeline's name while Evie was operating on her like 2 weeks prior, and led her to being suspicious of her and have mostly kept her sedated. But when Evie was constantly asking her questions, there was always a voice in her head that every time she wanted to talk was telling her to don't. And now 2 weeks later the voice is calling her, telling her to run, and with slight reluctance she listens, and also turns out the voice is Emmeline. So now going over to Aaron's reunion with his father, they're sitting in a room, talking, and he tells them how he had been saved, even Max, after having been shot in the head twice. But okay, very safely. And during this reunion, they both lay all their cards on the table, where Aaron lets his father know that he remembers everything, and that he knows that Juliet is Ella, and his father tells him how she and Emmeline were always just meant to be weapons in a war, and nothing more. And also how they have started to notice the sickness going around with the unnaturals. Aaron tries to convince him to forget about her and leave her alone, but realizes that they're not gonna get anywhere when his father shows him a video of a seizure she had during one of the experiments and tells him how Juliet is already gone and there's no getting her back. But he ends up killing him and wants to set out to find her, but let's be honest, he's probably still alive. Over to Ella and her candle reunion with Emmeline, who had led her throughout the building all the way to her, and she looked basically nothing like a human. She was held in a tank of water, her eyes and mouth were permanently shut, her nose was sunken in, she was basically just bone and skin with a tube to breathe. But being that she can communicate mentally like she has throughout this time, she tells her how it had been her who had been giving everyone their memories back. She wants them to fight back against their parents, but she also wants Ella to finally end her misery and kill her. She also removes her cuffs that had been preventing her from using her powers, which is when Evie walks in. Now realizing that she doesn't have her cuffs on, tries to calm her down, but obviously it doesn't work, and she rips her heart out. Okay, now moving on to our other everyday teenage parent killer. Aaron's standing over his father, and someone knocks him out with a needle. Why is he afraid of walking? When he wakes up in one of the lab rooms, his hair is back to its previous length before Kenji had got his hands on it, and he finds some of his clothes there. Then, while he's getting changed and is tying his shoes, Max walks in, and they're kinda chatting. Aaron lets him know that he knows he had been him outside his cell, coming and going, bringing the food. And Max tells him that surprisingly to no one, Anderson isn't dead, and that he's waiting for Evie, who we know is not ever gonna show up. But soon after Anderson walks in, an alarm goes off and Max runs out to go check it out, and the two of them are having a chat when Ibrahim furiously walks in, telling them that Evie is dead, but just then again he and Nazir whisper in his ear to not scream. Now checking on Ella, she is running out of there trying to escape. She runs into Kenji, They're both happy to see each other, but quickly agree to catch up later when they're safe. But Kenji does tell her how Anderson had convinced everyone that he had been sick this whole time, and Juliet had just taken advantage of that and tried to take over, but that he's still their supreme commander. When they safely get to the plane where he and Nazira had decided would be their meeting point, and he tells her that they also had set up a time so if she and Aaron aren't back in half an hour, they have to leave without them. And so check on how Aaron and Nazira escape is going. Well, it's not going too well. Aaron ends up getting shot and tries to heal himself by siphoning his father's healing powers, but it's going too slow, so Nazira just flies them out of there. And in the meantime, while waiting for them to make it to the plane, she and Kenji talk things out, while also getting more and more worried that they won't make it and they might have to leave without them. But luckily they get there in time and they take off. And throughout the flight, she and Aaron talk about how they both remember everything and how all the fights feels like a lifetime ago and none of it matters anymore. But she still wants to apologize, but when she later falls asleep in Aaron's POV, he feels like it's odd that someone actually ever apologized to him. Poor guy. And thinking everything over, if the relationship, he decides he wants to marry her. But when she later wakes up and he tries to propose, Kenji interrupts it, and they kinda have a friendly bickering, where Kenji trying to interrupt his proposal, and I was like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? Kinda trying to ask her something here. And Kenji's like, no you're not. Oh, anyways, he successfully managed to interrupt the proposal, and they also decide to take shifts flying the plane while the other two get to rest. And he and Aaron take the first shift, while Ella and Nazira eat and rest. While talking, Nazira tells her how she had been able to figure it all out. She had found some files about them that silent and naturals some years back, but hadn't been able to make sense of everything after she got her memories back. But even with everything she now knows, she still could never figure out why, but Ella tells her she knows why. Now going over to Aaron and Kenji, he tells him that he can't just ask her to marry him, just like that, and he needs to put some more effort into the proposal, or at the very least, get her a ring. And then the conversation moves over to talking about movies and actors, but all of a sudden they're shot out of the sky, and not having any better way to get out of the situation, they decide to jump, and with Aaron siphoning Nazira's flying powers, and then basically carrying Ella and Kenji safely to the ground. When they land, they see Castiel Nurian, and turns out they had been the ones to shoot them down, and Nuri admits that the assassin who had shot her at the beach had been sent by her because somehow shoot was the best way to get her message to them. Hey, Stefan shows up, being safe as well, and she goes on to catch them all up to that they wanted to replace Emmeline with her, and when Nazira tells them that they need to kill Evie, apparently not having heard her father tell them that she was dead, but then Ella tells them that she already has. And it seems that the news about her being alive has spread and is giving people hope for a better future. And then, when they all get to their own tent and resting, it's Aaron saying fuck it to every tip Kenji had given him and just simply ask her to marry him. And later Kenji interrupts them, saying that it's late and they need to get down there, and he senses that they're planning something and manages to reply that they're throwing him a surprise birthday party. And when they get down, everyone's there other than James and Adam, and they also have prepared a birthday cake for him. Now getting to the novella, Reveal Me, is entirely in Kenji's POV at Aaron's birthday party, and he's pissed and worried about James and Adam, who are missing, and no one seems to notice or care. They seem to just think that they decided to stay behind, because Adam kinda had planned to stay behind and didn't want to run away, but that had been before they knew Anderson was alive, and he knows he would have stayed there with James knowing Anderson still alive. He wants to talk to Ella about it, but both himself and Castiel wants to let have this night. Though while he's thinking about all of this, Nazir comes over to ask what's wrong, but he doesn't want to talk to her, being that he thinks she doesn't actually care. They kinda have a little fight, but he goes to his room and tries to go to sleep but can't, which is when Brendan gets tell him that Castiel wants to talk to him. When he gets there, they tell him how James and Adam are being held hostage together with the other Supreme Commander kid, but for some reason they want to wait before telling Ella and Aaron, but not agreeing with them at all, he goes over to tell them, and back in the room he's really not feeling good and ends up passing out. So turns out him feeling so bad was because Nazira had given him too much of whatever she had knocked him out with before the plane ride to make sure he wouldn't wake up, but he would just need some sleep and be fine after that. When he later wakes up in the middle of the night, there's someone in his room whom Tommy chases and tackles in the woods after throwing his gun at the person and saying that he's Nazira. They talk and seem to get together, but just then there's a scream from somewhere. When they get back, everything seems to be in a weird chaos, and when they try to warn everyone else, they already know, and Ella's on the ground screaming, begging Emily to not do this. I guess destroying everything. And with that, we're finished with book 5 and only have one more in the series to tie everything up. I guess that's all for now. Bye!